todos os insights e depois ela seleciona 5 ações para colocar em prática já no outro dia. Então a gente já pode fazer isso hoje, já deixa o caderninho, o tablet, o celular aí do lado para ir anotando tudo que vai acontecer hoje e já escolhe as ações também para começar a praticar a partir de amanhã. Bom, a gente teve muita interação também hoje de manhã. Vamos ver o que rolou de interação de hoje mais cedo?
Muita gente acompanhando a gente. Ó, o professor Ademar, que inclusive vai ser um dos nossos palestrantes hoje. Carlinha falando que é muito fã da Luísa e do Ari. Eita.
Não dá para ver o nome direito.
Mas deu para ver que era do Colégio Santa Mônica. A Mariane, sempre usando a hashtag Tô no SAS Summit. Inclusive, pausa um pouquinho aqui o Instagram, só para a gente lembrar.
To be talking to us is Professor Ademar. So we're going to start some changes with innovation. So we have a lot of news in education. Well, right after this at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a moment with an international speaker who's Mr. Cam, and he's going to talk about education with purpose. With innovations in education. He's going to talk a lot about how the resources, the educational resources that he offers can improve the learning process. Okay, in this last warm-up, we were talking about him, and it has everything to do with what you're saying now, this moment. So I would like you to share this story again because it's very inspiring. Okay, I'm a huge fan of his. I think that he always talks how he started. He used to record video classes for his nephews that were had difficulty in learning maths. And then he decided to distribute this content on YouTube. But besides the Academy, he wrote a book called The World in School, talking about his perceptions of the future of education. So how this type of content and about technologies and how you can personalize this for students. And one thing that I think is very cool, it's not a guide really, but it gives us a good vision of the future, what he imagines for 50, 100 years, and he can do this in a really light way. And I think this is something that I recommend to everyone. So that's great expectations for what we're going to do. And after that, we're going to have the closing with Adi. So that's one more moment to follow. Let's have a look at some comments that we're going to follow. We can see that some people are already interacting with us. So let me separate some people here who have talked to us. And this is Daniele Araújo from Nossa Senhora de Lourdes School. She's talking about the expectations of today. We have several from the military police in the Amazon. We have Daniele, Raquel. So these people were already very early in our chat, already following us and waiting for us to begin. So we've already started with some comments of yours. We have here, Sinara she said, good evening, I'm from a school from Bahia. So we can see that we're all over Brazil. This is really cool to see. Hey, look at this. There's another fan here. Look, I love to read this book. It's Claudia Teresa from Educational Center Santa Monica, Elaine from the town of Americana in São Paulo. So this is things come in so fast that we're really not able to follow everything. We have here the Caminho Suave School from Sertãozinho in São Paulo, someone from Rio. So thank you all for your presence. We're just starting. And now we're going to start our countdown for us to be able to begin. So we'll be back here in the iteration zone. And soon we will be starting with our program. See you soon. Good evening to all of you. You are most welcome. I'm from SAS Educational, and today we're going to follow you on the one more day. In fact, it is the last day. Yeah, very happy to follow you. Everything very well organized for us. And now that we're on the last day, I'd like to talk and remind you what went on all these days and what we still have to learn. I was very happy when this question didn't fall for me, actually. That's a huge responsibility. Well, we learned a lot during the last days, during the last weeks. I remember that this creativity, improvisation, the fundaments of the classroom, and how all this can bring new innovations to the classroom. We also learned a lot about innovation, about how to simplify and personalize education. We also learned a lot thinking about the pillars, right? Technology, education, and innovation. The three pillars, we talked a lot about this the whole time, and we're going to continue talking about this today. Our programming is really cool. I'm going to start telling you what's going to happen during the last day today. So let's go ahead. Today we're going to have a chat talking about innovation in high school with Vinicius Dalton, Ademar Celedonio. We're going to talk about the main impacts, and we have a very current person, as Mr. Can, talking, and also we're not going to stop there. We have further programs, and we're going to have a super chat how to innovate with purpose with Sal Can from the Can Academy. And then we also have Rafael Martins. In this talk, we're going to learn a bit more about the journey and experience of Can and find out how technology can be an ally for education with excellence. And also to close our event, we will have Adi, who's our CEO and founder, to chat with us and to close this amazing day. Well, we should also remember that we don't have a mask on, but we did all the tests, the whole team here who's taking care of the event. So we protected ourselves the maximum possible to be able to participate now with all of you. Now I'm going to give the floor to Cassio, who was there in the interaction zone. And Cassio, I'm going to talk to you about what's going on in the interaction. Well, thank you, Izaki. Thank you, everyone. If you don't know me, I'm Cassia. I'm a specialist in digital products in SAS, and I've been working here with Isaac with our moments in the interactive zone. Don't you know what this is? This is a space reserved exclusively for us to follow everything that you post on the social networks, and it's a way of being closer to you in an event with a digital format. If you want to show up here together with us, well, Isaac is there in the main focus. I'm going to be following with you here, but you can keep me company. All you have to do is use the hashtag and put at education, at educação in Portuguese. All the information is here, our Instagram, our YouTube. You can see the addresses below. So comment on the chat. Where are you? What's your expectation? Where you're talking? What are the main insights, the questions, the doubts? Because we're paying attention. And I think you can look here quickly at the chat. You can see that there's a lot of people are interacting already. We have here Claudiana from the Educational Center Santo Agostinho saying good evening. She's from Natal in the Northeast. We have Elza Barluz from the school in São Luís do Maranhão. Good evening from the Colégio Normal in São Francisco de Assis. Elizabeth has already left her comments. This is being wonderful, and we'll come back with further comments. So let's move ahead and start our program. Now, see you soon, guys. Thank you, Cassia. Well, later on, we'll meet each other here on the main stage. We have some notifications. We have 3 transmission rooms. In the room number 1 is the contact totally in Portuguese, the number 2 in English, and the 3 we have interpretation in sign language. So we have all these options. If you're not in the right room, come back and make your choice, which is the best room for you. Wow, that's amazing. Well, enough of notifications. Let's start our program, which is incredible. And to start, I want to ask you and invite you to chat about technology and innovation and how these 2 pillars can be put together in quality education. We're going to talk a little bit about the big changes in high school. I want to invite our guests who are going to help us understand the perspectives of the changes in high school and how we're thinking about these transitions for our partners. So let's meet our guests. So help us out, production guys. This person has an experience as a biology teacher and in popular courses. As a volunteer, he's been an educational consultant. He's written educational materials. And today he's the national director of educational consulting of SAS. We now invite, and it's a huge pleasure to receive Marcos Morigi. And to share this moment with him, we have another special guest, professor, teacher in math, and author of educational materials. He has over 25 years experience in the sector of basic education as a teacher, coordinator, director, and special lecturer of the ENING. He also works actively in public policies towards education. We now announce the direction and of teaching and innovation in SAS, Ademar Celedonio. But we also have another super important guest. He's an administrator by the Federal University of Ceará, and he's a leader in digital products with Terra. He led operational teams in Ambev and Gerdau. He's here with us for 6 years, and he's responsible for the training of teachers, products, management services, business agility, and engagement with the product. So we invite our executive manager of educational solutions and business agility, Vinicius Daltro. Together, Vinicius, Ademar, and Morigi will be talking about the main impacts and the challenges that the new high school brings to schools, bring the vision of SAS, and showing how creativity, innovation, and technology are the big allies for this moment. Good evening. Good evening to all my colleagues who are here with me. Good evening to everyone who's watching us from home, from school. And it's a huge pleasure to be here with you. I think this topic has everything to do with the summit, everything to do with education, everything to do with innovation, everything to do with technology. Morigi, Ademar, good evening. Okay, let's move on. I think it's a very interesting topic. It has everything to do with the summit. It's on the agenda of all schools. What we've most been talking about with our schools, I think, is the topic of high school. I'd like to start here the conversation. I'd like to ask Modiji to help us to talk about the context in which we find ourselves now, this new high school, the role of schools, the role of our youngsters. So please help us to give towards the first step in this chat. Well, let's move on. Sure, I think for us to start to talk about school, to talk about this new challenge that the schools will have to deal with in the next year of 1922, with this adequation, to remind you that this last part of basic education has to guarantee the permanency of students that come from other areas. But this also has to respond to the dreams of these people, the dreams for the current moment, this adolescent, and also the dreams for the future, because that's where some important decisions that they have in their life begin. And these aspirations, these are punctuated by rapid transformations, by technological development that impacts directly this young person. And it makes this young person's education be turned towards not only the understanding, but the confronting of new challenges, whether they be social, environmental, economical, of our contemporary world, but without forgetting that we also have to prepare them for the challenges that will come, that we don't know, that they don't know, but that they have to be ready to confront. What does this mean? This means that we, in this segment, but especially in this segment, we have to guarantee to students an education that has to do with the current world, but also related to their story, to their choices, allowing them to define their projects of life, or at least reflect about their life projects so that they can reflect on topics that perhaps they would not have thought about, or that they would have thought about later. This is a bit of what we wanted to do when we bring our life project, give this opportunity to the students to think about these points, because what are these projects of life? So this is a very important point, and this is one of the guidelines to transform and define the life projects of the students. It's also the duty of us professionals from the schools. It's also our idea to contribute so that these young kids can take responsible decisions, and decisions based on the acquisition of autonomy, promote their autonomy. And in this, by the same token, that we contribute to develop critical thought. That means educate young kids who are autonomous and have critical thinking. And what we want to talk to you with this conversation are concrete examples to enable them to develop these qualities. In this new context, we have to stimulate these choice possibilities of these young kids, and this will come through the formative itineraries, and these itineraries are going to respond to these interests and to these aspirations and desires, as well as deepening in a certain area of knowledge according to their wishes. And again, this is what we want to show, and we want to show you how this is going to pan out in school. So I think the most important thing now in the new high school is that it values the youngster. It appreciates the youngster. That's what we intend. And the choice of the itineraries starts with taking over this role, not only due to their choices, but also to develop the competences and the abilities to deal with the century. So this is our challenge, how to take this to the schools. And we are going to present this to you with these minutes. It's just giving you a general idea of what it's all about. Thank you very much, Morigi. I think you were very clear. This is a dream that I think everyone who works with education has, right? To be able to educate this new generation, taking in consideration all the perspectives that you mentioned. But it's also a fact that we are in a difficult context. We had the implementation, we're in the second year now of the pandemic. We implemented changes a couple of years ago. We're in a scenario where there are a lot of inspiring things, but there are also a huge range of possibilities, and there are also uncertainties, right? and look at the matrix of the new Enem that still hasn't been launched. So I think all the scenario is complex, very complex. So I'd like to ask Professor Ademar and hear him tell us, within so many variables and dreams and all this complexity, how SAS is conducting innovation in its solution. Could you share a bit with us, Professor, please? Look, Vinny, I believe Muriji, when he brought all this information related here, he put it very well. And there's a whole process, for example, the structural parts, everything that starts with scientific investigation, creative process, and also entrepreneurship. So all this is born in here. We do have some rules, like 1,800 hours of the general information, which are the abilities that the person's going to take for life, one way or another. This details a certain fear of the schools now. How am I going to make all the content fit into this? It already didn't fit in before. We know that the structures are going to change, but we do have the idea that in 2024, we're going to have a new Enem. So we know there's the general information, these abilities that the student is going to take for life. And in the second part, you have a mixture of some possibilities of knowledge areas, but we have a clear notion that not everyone is going to have to study everything. I studied all biology to be a mathematician, and I studied. So what for all this information that I wasn't going to use, and also the aspirations that I have to take to my life. Today we see society, we have a lot of content, and a lot of this content is not remembered, even of citizenship, concepts, basic concepts of math, of philosophy, of the environment. So couldn't we perhaps deliver to universities a better prepared student? And we're not inventing this. Brazil is one of the last countries in the world of these that are, for example, evaluated with the CBE in the PISA test. Let's say that a model where you have 13 subjects. I reread a book recently. It was recommended by Professor Jorge in the first programs. And there it says that in 1968, he studied and with one of the three choices, and England established this model that we have today in 1944. So it's been a long time that this has advanced, and we have a very dynamic model, very different from other aspirations. But in general, we want students to learn the basic abilities for life, and then we want them to awaken their passions and give them a journey, sort of a more practical journey. And that's what we want to show, the 4 ways to go in the first semester in 2022.
What do you have? What do you see in 2022? Perfect, teacher. Thank you. Well, I think it was clear throughout our speech that we have a lot of responsibility in our hands. It was very good to have this year that we have to celebrate the approval at CESU, and we have more than 7,000 dreams that we had at CESU and that we could fulfill. So we have to conduct this process in a very innovative way, but also being very safe in what we are doing. So I think that's one of the pillars of the high school, of the secondary school. Professor Ademar said every time, because he was smiling, because every time that we have a conversation about this topic, people are very curious about. On March 17, we launched the 8 formative itineraries that we will have in 2022. So these are the first ones, and you'll have more in the coming years, and the 8 itineraries will be worked through digital tools. And now we are gonna deepen 4 specific trails that we have in the context of the itineraries. These ones are going to be used in 2022, 4 of them in the first half of the year and 4 of them in the second half. I will not give you any spoiler because the teachers will share what they are about. So Ademar, can you please tell a bit about the itinerary, about the idioms and language itinerary? I'm just waiting to see the slide. We have the subject program here. So we have we have different names, one for each of 4 of them. This content is something that it's advancing very quickly, and it's sometimes students say that they cannot take the pace because it's something that we are implementing in a very fast way. So we have the learning objects, the maps, and the duration, the number of hours that we'll have to dedicate to each of them. And also, I would like to talk about the idiom and language subject. We have the curricular components. So you have tests and test interpretation. And we have some abilities that we have them provided in the National Common Curricula, in the Common Core Curricula. So we have 10 competencies that we have to study. So we have live project, digital ability. So communication and sharing, argumentation, autonomy and responsibility. And the structuring axis, we have 4 structuring axes. They can go horizontally or vertically. So they can have scientific investigation, creative processes, and mediation and social cultural intervention, and also entrepreneurship. So we can have an itinerary from one axis only, which is like, say, scientific investigation, or we can have one with the 4 axes. And who are the students that are going to work with these suggestions? These are the students that will start in January, and we'll show them these itineraries. Students that are considering to have a career in journalism, advertising, law. And how can we work with these 4 objects as a knowledge object? So we have 4 projects here. One's called Buying This Idea. One, it's if it's on the internet, it's truth, an invisible argumentation, and you are on the matrix. So we have these 4 units, these curriculum units that are presented within the itinerary. And so within the first one, we have, by this idea, we talk about how to produce an advertising, how to produce a video, and how we see the publicity and advertisement in our lives, and how we understand the different processes and the persuasion that they involve. So we have this motto that is not consumption, is about experience. So how these ideas are delivered in our daily lives. So we present these ideas to make the student understand the elements of the narrative that fit in this discourse. The second one, if it's on the internet, is truth. So we talk about hypocrisy, who is to blame, on fake news. How can we analyze some op-eds on newspapers, how one newspaper mentioned something and the other mentioned differently? How news is produced? Is there something behind it? How a fake news piece is produced? Is it something that is from our days only, or it's something that comes from the past? We have the history of fake news shows that we have this for a long time. But it's something that is been very present in our lives today, even for evil purposes. And the last point in this topic is the reporter profession. How can you work as a reporter and to produce an article and a report on a social topic? So in the first unit, you have advertisement. And on the second one, you have also fake news. So you can construct and build together and have a practical experience in a social project to have them together. As for the third item, it's invisible argumentation. So the author of this topic, he developed very cool items. They refer to who you are following on the internet, how do you engage, and the cancel culture. How can you identify the cancel culture? So the focus here is to develop the awareness and how can you work on a profile or a website in a very conscious manner. And the fourth topic, it's you are on the matrix. Nothing is like it seems. We talk a lot about in the past about utopia, and now we are talking about dystopia. It's something that is trending, and we have some very deep conversations about dystopia and dystopic items. So is it a literary gender? Is it some genre or something that we can have in our work on a daily basis in the school? And then they will have also a practical activity, producing a short film about. So this was just an overview of one itinerary, and I hope you like it. Well, Professor Teacher, I think when you are going deeper to the itineraries, we are also like to mention the innovation, technology, but just having a quick look at the first one, you could see how we can develop, how teachers can work, and how careers are also embedded in this process. Morigi, I would like you to share in a summarized way the specific trail that we are considering for the natural sciences area. For natural science, we have environment. So the choices that you have today, you have to live with them tomorrow. One of the aspects of the program content is to show you just a very tiny part of it, because teachers will receive this in the coming weeks, and so that they can direct them for the first half of 2022 and have a way in the specific itineraries for their schools. But I think it was clear that the developing of such itineraries will strengthen the decision-making that is responsible, that it's driven by this to the student, and we will have some topics that will be common in all itineraries, the apex of each one. These itineraries are built considering each topics will be more adherent to biology or to chemistry, and they can have the geography, for example, teachers. So we can have an intersection of other areas of other teachers. So in this itinerary, we have the argumentation, the economy, and finance, but this specific itineraries must be related to the structural axis. And so we connected them to the 4 itineraries that we'll have in the first half of 2022, and also to those that we'll present in the second half of 22 and in the coming years. So it's important that we have this axis, and that can be more broad in the coming years. And we are also welcoming suggestions from the students. Sometimes a student will have already has an idea of his future choices. So when we present this itinerary this way, they can have all their ideas and they can connect their own expectations. So we also have 4 big units in the program content. So we have 4 units, 4 big units. From the beginning, it's the construction, which is to gather tools. The second one is how to help, and with them we want to build a critical sense on the students and have an experience with different methodologies. So in the end, not only the end, but throughout the project, they can have a deeper understanding of the processes. So we will approach the value of biodiversity. We will touch fake news, sustainable development, and then all the specific itineraries will go to an apex in the end. So we have this logic to provide a freedom to the teacher to create different areas and then to walk through this path and thus develop the students. We consider that it's very different from the titles, from the content structure. Professor Ademar, can you talk a little about this specific trail, please? Hold on, I think it's a technical issue. This is so common during the pandemic. I'm so sorry. I think we have, within this unit of the curricular components, we have communication and sharing, advertisement and publicity, and we have a process that reflect our lack of financial education. We have a huge percentage of Brazilian families that are on debt. So this model that we are establishing about financial education is connected to the daily life of students. So we talk about percentages. We have this on elementary, on the 7th grade, 8th grade, on elementary school. But we have this as a spiral concept. So we aim to develop these abilities from the elementary school and bring them to high school. So we explain to them how you can buy a thing and have an interest rate over it, and how this interest rate actually make the price higher, things like that. And within this model, we know that students that are connected to careers that are on the business school or in the economy, they will have more familiarity with it. But we can make this a multi-subject content. So we can have teachers from other areas to explain how finance concepts are embedded in our daily life. We can have an analysis of the relationship with money from in science history, and how it's connected with this can be translated to our life today, and how can we be a citizen of the future. For example, how much is 25% of 400? And people hear a question like that and they become concerned, because it's math sometimes is scary, especially in Brazil, because we don't have this education. So it's not about developing a math concept, but develop as a citizen. If you take this to the first itinerary, to a student that is thinking about advertising, and he put this concept of the finance word into it, it will bring a very interesting approach. And also, this can also be connected to entrepreneurship and to among young people. Thank you, teacher. I think it's something that it's very, you can see as a whole education. So Maurício, I would like to mention the last trail, so we can have the connection with other topics that we have on the summit. So Ademar mentioned his trail. So Muriji, can you also say something that you are considering for human sciences? So in human science, we are our main topic is the world, the moving world. So biology is here, philosophy is here, sociology is here. Again, we have the axis, and we also have suggestions of careers, so to make it easier for our students. When you go to content, for the program content, the idea is to debate our today's generation and fake news.
Always taking critical decisions, economy decisions, talk a little bit. And we're going to end with the sustainable development issues, the goals of sustainable development, contributing with the professors of biology, of chemistry. The idea is not to be stopped, is to be working with the human science professors and the culminants in all the times we've taken care to make this moment as the final job for this student in this itinerary. It's a way that he's going to show in a practical way everything that he learned in this process, as if it was the end of an itinerary, but that he can go and take this on the journey of life. So we've had the zeal to take care of this process of culminating. So just to finish here, during the next days, the schools are going to receiving these this content. This is just to give you an idea, and we're able to plan during the next semester of 2000 and for the year of 2022 as well. Well, here in the chat, they're asking how is the choice format. So I think that you can choose 2 of these itineraries. Well, perfect. Thank you, Ademar. Well, now talking about the Moriz talk, there's a lot of anxiety about the implementation of these new structures that we're talking about. Now, to calm everyone down, our consultants are very well prepared. Every time we advance, they follow us. We're going to have a formative trail, which is going to have the general structure, the deepening, the relationship with the community. There's going to be a very wide scope. And to close our talk, we're coming to the final considerations. Why did we bring this topic that talks about technology, innovation, education? I think the educational front is obvious, the impact that this can bring, a new perspective. And on the technology side, I think it's very cool to say that it's a 100% digital experience. We're talking about content that is launched like that. It's not content that starts as a PDF. That is going to have a series of other possibilities. And in an innovation front, we've done this in a very collaborative manner. We've used the agile methodologies involving a lot of schools, a lot of teams, and this whole process, we believe that will bring a mature solution for our schools in 2022. To conclude, and with the topics of the summit, I'd like to give Professor Ademar and Professor Morigi to give their final considerations. Morigi, well, I believe that our idea is to deliver this solution which aligns the live project of the students. Remember that besides this, we continue with the live project next year, a new model, but that allows this reflection, his desires. So align this live project with the learning trails that can allow for these dreams at the school. And this is also enabling the composition of the specific trails. So as you said, in the second semester, we're going to have specific education formation. For example, we're going to have a general one, a trail, and another one for each different itinerary. For that teacher who's going to work for that itinerary, he'll have an educational module that will help him. And in mid-May, June, up to the second semester, we're sitting down with the schools and debating and talking about this transition for the new high school. It's a balanced transition, do not cause any disturbances, especially in relation to the teachers. We should remember something very important. All the material available, it comes in digital format. It's digital material that will be available in the portal of the schools, and they will have digital access. And the teacher who's going to work with these itineraries will be the school teacher that will have been trained in the second semester. So we're available to give you all the support in this transition for the schools, which will be intensified in the second semester, preparing for 2022. Thank you very much for our conversation for the day. Well, now I would like to say that my thoughts are exactly the same as Morigi's. I think we can debate more and think, and there's always a lot more to talk about, but we're here to help you in this transition process. And Vini, I would like to change the subject. I would like to talk about, well, way back in 2015, no, sorry, before, I'm going to give you a tip and you can give the word back. You can give the floor back to Cassia, and the next talker. You brought a point about doubts, and to reinforce a concept that we believe a lot in its educational life, which is continuous education. It's not just one moment that's going to prepare the schools for this transition. That's why we have continuous education very much in line with the teachers. We have courses, initiatives, and we believe that the schools follow this, and in the second semester, they'll see these formative trails and all different aspects of the education as well. So I would like to register this. This evolution, this innovation, this transformation is not done in one day. And thank you very much for the chat and all the colleagues. And then Demari now, and then Cassia, and the next speaker. Thank you very much, Vini and Morija. Well, what the tip I want to give you is, way back in 2015, we were reading a book called The World is a School, and this was an inspiring book. Do you like Eureka? Tell us in the chat. Eureka, the inspiration of our video classes. We have 8,000 video classes to prepare this third year of high school. Imagine where all this start was reading a book. The World is a School of Salman Khan. So thank you very much. And I'm going to now watch the rest of the session. Thank you. Well, here we are back in our interaction zone. After this wonderful chat, I became very envious of the students that will be able to benefit from these formative itineraries. I want to go back to school to learn like that. However, we know that the challenges of this transitions are huge, but we believe that using creativity, innovation, and technology, we will build this together, you and SAS. So I'm going to give us an interval now, and our program will continue in 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Estamos de volta aqui, que tem muito mais SAS Summit pra gente. Isaac, a Cassi falou agora do quanto ela queria voltar à vida de ensino médio, né, gente? Mas eu fico pensando o quanto deve ser prazeroso hoje para os alunos do ensino médio ver essas grandes mudanças acontecendo. De fato, eu acredito que esses itinerários vão fazer, ou preparar, na verdade, nossos alunos ainda mais, não somente para o mercado de trabalho, mas para a vida, né?
Estamos com isso.
Verdade. Bom, gente, a gente está preparando muita coisa boa, mas antes da gente ir para a próxima programação, quero convidar vocês a assistir um vídeo incrível que nós preparamos para vocês. Solta aí, produção.
There are all types of schools, though that with the innovative spirit of pioneers in the usage of technology for human development. There are schools that through their excellency management, they deliver excellent schooling. Even in adverse scenarios, there are other schools that know that through their educational quality, they're able to offer the most updated content, and they have an excellent repertoire. There are also schools that generate the 1,000 score student doing everything to have the best results. And there are also schools that are very preoccupied with the training and formation of teachers. But all these schools have the same purpose, to guarantee the best education for their students. We also want that. And if each school has a different profile, all school profiles have a SAS. That is right. There's a SAS for each school. Now, I was looking at the chat. There was a research and about the preparation of high school. So you can count on our consultants that our role is to help you. And if you want to know more about what we're talking here, just access the QR code. Yes, Isaac. Well, we know how much technology is in all fields and making everything happen in a different way. We in education and at school, it wouldn't be different. We've learned here in the last events how much innovation and technology is a part of our history. And our next guest comes to share experiences and tell us how he applied technology in education to create high quality education to anyone, anywhere. So I want to call the CEO and founder of the Academy, and to compose this unique moment, the executive director, Rafael Martinez. Let's learn a bit more about these three people. 3 graduations by MIT and an MBA from Harvard. He's reached over 20 million students in his platform. He was recognized by Time magazine as one of the 100 more influential people in the world. He wrote the One World Schoolhouse, and he founded the Khan Lab School, and also founder and CEO of the Khan Academy, an organization that offers free education accessible to all. It's a pleasure to call Sal Khan. And to follow this moment, we have another very special guest. He studied public administration, and he's a master for the University of Columbia in New York. where he graduated in business administration and became a fellow of the Estudar Foundation, the Lehman Foundation, and the Brazilian U.S. Chamber of Commerce. He worked as a consultant of large companies of the public and private sector. He founded the NGO Vector Brazil. Today, he's the Executive Director of Educational Solutions of SAS. We announce and introduce Rafael Martins. Ken is going to share his experience, and he's going to tell us how education applied with technology can elevate the quality of education.
Boa noite a todos, boa noite a todas.
Good evening
Meu nome é
to
Rafael
everyone.
Martins,
My name
sou
is
diretor
Rafael
de soluções
Martins.
educacionais aqui do SAS.
I'm
É um grande
educational
prazer estar com
director here
vocês
at
aqui
SAS, and
hoje,
it's a pleasure to
compartilhando
be with
esse
you
último
here
dia do
today,
SAS Summit.
sharing this
Admito que já...
last day of the summit. I'm already missing the summit. We're almost saying goodbye with this marvelous event. During these next moments, we will learn more about one of the biggest educational references, Sal Khan, who's the creator of the academy. And I'm now going to change
We're excited to learn
English.
more from you tonight. It's a great honor for us from SAS and from Brazil to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Great to be here, Rafael.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your journey. You started in the financial market, and suddenly your career flipped and took a total different path with Khan Academy. We are curious to understand how and why you did that. What motivated you to make such a change?
Yeah, actually, my original career was in technology, and then after business school, I found myself working in finance. I was an analyst at an investment firm in Boston, and it was in 2004. I was 1 year out of business school. I had just gotten married, and my family was visiting me in Boston from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And while they were visiting me, it just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin Nadia needed help in mathematics, that she was having trouble with unit conversion. So I offered to tutor her remotely back in 2004, and slowly but surely it worked out for her. She actually went from having lack of confidence in math to being quite good at it. Then I started tutoring her younger brothers. Word spread in my family that free tutoring was going on. And before I knew it, I was working with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country, while I still had my day job as an analyst at a hedge fund. And with my background in software, I saw a common pattern that the reason why a lot of my family members were struggling wasn't because they weren't bright, wasn't because the subject was difficult, it wasn't because they didn't have great teachers. It was because they had accumulated gaps, or they had forgotten a lot of concepts that build on each other. So if they only understood 80% of decimals, and then 90% of exponents, and then 70% of negative numbers, then when they had to apply all of those in an algebra class, they had a lot of difficulty. So what I started doing is making software for them that could give them as much practice and as much feedback as they needed to fill in those gaps, or to refresh any understanding that they needed. And I found this very useful for me as a tutor or a teacher, because I had 15 cousins that all had different needs, and the software was helping meet their individual needs. And that was the first Khan Academy, just this family software project that I had started for my cousins. And then in 2006, I was showing this off at a dinner party. As you can imagine, I'm not that much fun as a dinner party guest. And the host of the dinner party said, "Sal, now this is nice, but how are you scaling your actual lessons with your family?" And I told him it's difficult to do with 15 cousins that I was originally just doing with 1 or 2. And he said, "Well, why don't you record lessons to complement your exercises, your software, and upload them onto YouTube for your family?" And I immediately said, that's a horrible idea. YouTube is for dogs on skateboards, cats playing piano. It's not for real learning. But I gave it a shot anyway. And, then between the videos on YouTube and the software that I was just making available to anyone who wanted to use it, not only did my cousins let me know that they liked me better on YouTube than in person, and what they were really saying is that they liked having me accessible whenever they wanted, and they could pause, they could repeat, they can do the exercises on the software whenever they wanted, get immediate feedback. But what I also saw is many people who are not my cousins were using this, and people started sending me incredible letters about how this was helping them pass a course. Teachers were emailing me saying how they were using this in their classrooms to make sure that every student is supported. Parents and students were saying that this was almost like a virtual tutor that their family couldn't otherwise afford. And so by 2009, there were 50 or 100,000 folks around the world who were using these resources every month. And so that's when I set it up as a not-for-profit organization, a public charity with a mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And that's when I quit my day job, hoping that the philanthropic community would appreciate the social benefit of this is really almost infinite. And so it wasn't until 2010, it was a tough year, 2009, to live off the savings. But by 2010, we got our first philanthropic support from folks like Google.org, from the Gates Foundation. Shortly thereafter, we got support from the Lemon Foundation to go out to Brazil. So our Brazilian Khan Academy, br.khanacademy.org, is one of the most developed versions of Khan Academy that we have. And we've been on that ride ever since. So, you know, fast forward today, as was in the introduction, 20 or 30 million students come every month, 120 million registered users, and it's available in over 50 languages around the world.
I see. And you talk about the dinner parties. I would love to have dinner with you if you ever come to Brazil. So let me know. Of course, this conversation today will be about education and technology. And we know that the pandemic changed a lot on how everyone sees the impacts of technology and education. So my first question in this topic is, do we already know if technology works? And do we have proof of the impact on student learning from technology?
Great question. And, you know, I always remind folks that technology is neither good nor evil. It is neutral. And what matters more is how you use the technology. So I'll be the first to mention that, and I'm often viewed as, you know, kind of the representative of online learning for the world in many cases. But I'll be the first to say that for myself, for my own children, for anyone else's children, if I had to pick between an amazing teacher in person with no technology versus the best technology in the world, I would pick the in-person teacher every time because the human connection, the adaptability, the ability to feel supported, there's nothing, no technology that can match what an amazing human being can do for a learner. Now, with that said, we ideally don't have to make that trade-off. Ideally, we can think about how to use technology that is in service to that amazing human relationship between the teacher and the student. I also want to emphasize, a lot of times, people want to use technology for technology's sake. They want to use it because it looks modern or they think they should. But that's not the right way to think about it. You have to think about, what is your pedagogical goal? And then based on your pedagogical goal, you need to think about, what are the resources that can help you meet those goals? The resources could be, in fact, the most important resource is an amazing teacher, amazing administrators, communication with parents. It could be things like pencil and paper, which are technology of sort, or it could be using software, using tools like Khan Academy. What the pedagogical goal that Khan Academy has always been focused on is really two things. One, how do we make sure that all teachers and students have access to world-class learning materials that adapt to the needs of the teacher and the student? And then the second goal is, every teacher will tell you that in a class of 30 students, every one of those students is different. They all show up into the classroom with different levels of preparedness. They all have different gaps. They've all forgotten different things. They're all ready to learn at different rates. But in a traditional system, we move them all together because, frankly, that's the only practical way to do it if you don't have the help of technology. So the pedagogical goal that we try to go for, that we try to help teachers with, we try to help students with, families with, is, what if we could support the classroom so that students can work more flexibly at their own time and pace, work more flexibly to fill in any gaps they have, to provide teachers better real-time information on where their students are, so that teachers can do focus interventions. If 10 students are still having trouble with something, they can focus on those 10 while the other 20 continue to work at their own pace. Then they can work with another 5 students who might be struggling with another concept. Then they can go sit next to one student who just seems disengaged to try to understand what's going on. They can pair students with each other. So the students aren't just the recipients of the knowledge, but they can help be teachers. They can help be tutors for their peers, which we know has all sorts of other benefits. So once again, technology is not good. It's not evil. It matters how you use it and what's your goal with it.
I see. And you talked about the trade-off, right, between an in-person teacher and a technology. But now that we are living the pandemic world, not as fast in Brazil as in the US, but we have the possibility of the hybrid education, right, in which you can have both worlds, right, both the in-teacher professor and the technology. What tips and advices do you give for people that are listening to us about what those schools should use as this hybrid version of education in the next few years?
Yeah, you know, and even before the pandemic, people have been talking about blended learning, which is blending use of technology, tool like Khan Academy, with the in-person classroom. And now we've been hearing, to your question, a lot more about hybrid instruction, which is this notion, which is might be referring to online, offline. It might also be referring to distance learning versus in-person learning. Online learning and distance learning sometimes get combined, but they don't necessarily mean the same thing. You could do online learning in a classroom with the student there, with the teacher there, and you could do distance learning with no technology. As we all know, they had correspondence programs 50 years ago, 100 years ago, where you can do it with the mail. Now that obviously is not ideal. The way I think about it, whether we're talking about online learning, blended learning, distance learning, is what is the optimal experience for the students, for the teachers, for the parents, for the administrators? And to me, and this is something we've been preaching well before the pandemic, is that when human beings are in the room together, optimize that. Try to make a world where they're able to talk to each other, where they're able to interact with each other, that they can feel that they're in a social environment. And so I think some of the traditional information dissemination that traditionally happened in classrooms, that can start to happen in more of a blended hybrid way, where students can get micro lessons at their own time and pace. They can practice things at their own time and pace. It could happen in the classroom. It could happen at home, especially if we can get devices to the kids who need it most at home. And then when you come to the classroom, make it as interactive as possible. Try to minimize the amount of time that we educators are lecturing and maximize the amount of time that kids are able to work on their zone of proximal development, or that right at their learning edge. Maximize the amount of time, make it a two-way conversation between the teacher and the student, ask them questions, make it very active learning. This is something we learned during the pandemic. Teachers all over the world showed us, and they told us that, hey, if you just lecture to people on Zoom, they're going to check out. They're going to go to other videos or other windows, do other things. And so I think teachers globally learned during the pandemic to engage students over video conference. They have to mix it up. They have to make it conversational. They have to leverage breakout sessions. And so, you know, what we're really pushing and we're learning from a lot of educators is to keep doing that even when we get into the physical setting. Even in the physical setting, we know that the best practice is having a two-way conversation with the students. Make it active learning, as opposed to them just passively listening. Have them constantly work on problems, collaborate on things, whether it is one problem that the whole classroom is struggling with together, or they're able to work at their own time pace on a tool like Khan Academy.
I see. And you talked about teachers, and we feel that the teachers were probably some of the professionals that suffered the most during the pandemic, because it was such a great change in their environment, in their context, and what they do. What have you seen of best practice of teachers during the pandemics? What kind of tips can you give to our own teachers here that are listening to us tonight?
Yeah, you know, and we've been learning a lot from teachers all over the world. And I would say the first thing is you have to take care of yourself. And that might seem like a small thing, but I even remind myself this as someone who is running a not-for-profit, and I have 3 kids at home, and obviously trying to maintain it at home, that if if the stresses, and this is a very stressful time for so many reasons, if those things get to you, then they're going to affect your students as well. So you as a teacher, make sure you're taking time for self-care. I'm a big fan of meditation. I try to meditate every morning, but whatever works for you, go for a walk. Make sure you have some downtime, some time to decompress. Because once again, you might think that you don't have the time for it, but if you just keep moving, it's going to stress you out, and then that's going to have a negative impact on folks around you. Then related to that, I'm a big believer that less is more. To focus on the things that are really important for you and your students, and to let go of other things. Because if the students are really able to engage and master on the things that are really important, they're going to be fine. And once again, just as this has been a tough year for you and you need to have some time and space to rest and recharge, your students and their parents also need some time and space for that. So I think there has to be broad recognition of that. In general, if, and I know this is a big if you're in an environment where students have reasonable access to online learning, I encourage you to leverage Khan Academy as much as you like. Once again, br.khanacademy.org. It's in Brazilian Portuguese. It is at one of our most built-out versions of Khan Academy. It allows students to learn at their own time and pace, whether in person or whether you're working with your students on video conference. Mix it up and start to realize that some of the constraints that you used to have pre-pandemic aren't necessarily there during the pandemic or even post-pandemic. In a traditional academic environment, you have roughly an hour with roughly 30 students. But in this world, maybe it makes more sense to do 20 minutes at a time with 10 students at a time. You'll still reach all 30 kids, but it'll be in smaller groups. You'll be able to differentiate the instruction a little bit for each of the students. You'll be able to form connections with them. And there's no research that says an hour on Zoom is a good thing. I'd argue that if it's more personalized and you're able to spend 20 minutes with a smaller group, that actually might be more valuable. Or even more, you could spend 10 minutes a time with a group of 5 kids each. Once again, that might provide more personalization. Whether you are continuing to do online distance learning or once you get into the classroom, try to continue to leverage these best practices that we've learned during the pandemic. Leverage breakout rooms, put kids in groups together, have them struggle on problems together, have them work on things together. It could be paper-based exercises that stretch their understanding. It could be online exercises on Khan Academy. But I think continuing to mix it up, making it as interactive as possible, and also just focusing on the essentials and making sure that everyone has room to breathe, everyone has room to do their meditation or whatever makes them more grounded, I think is really important.
Interesting. So another point is we're talking to our professors that use our platform that they should record their own videos and create their own content, because somehow it creates a connection, a link between them and their own kids. I know that you still record a lot of videos for Khan Academy. So what kind of tips could you give to our professors in terms of how do you create a great video? How do you create a great content and things like that?
Yeah, and first of all, I completely agree. I think it's a great idea for everyone listening, to the professors, to teachers, to make your own content, but at the same time, leverage the content that's already out there. Obviously, we've made thousands of videos for you, and there's other resources as well. And where I think the area that could be really valuable is for you as the teacher to provide a lot of the metacognitive. Obviously, if there's a certain type of exercise or certain concept that you don't see covered well on Khan Academy or other things, definitely do that content as well. But I think for the students to see you explaining things like, why is this important? Why is this relevant? Why do you care about it? I think will get your students really motivated and activated. In terms of making the content itself, my biggest tip, and it seems simple, but I've seen so many people not do this, is be yourself. Let your personality come out in your video. Don't overplan it. I can't tell you how many people that when I talk to them as friends, they're super interesting and they're excited about what they're doing. But as soon as you put a video camera on them, they want to read a script and they start talking like this. They become very formal. They don't want to. If you're not interested in what you're doing, there's no way that your students are going to be interested in it. I tell this to myself. I tell this to the whole team at Khan Academy. If you aren't excited about the content you're making, and if it doesn't show in the video, your students aren't going to be excited. If you're not interested, your students aren't going to be interested. One of the things that I force myself to do before I press record on any video, no matter what my mood is, no matter what type of a day I've been having, I force myself to smile. I literally, I do an artificial smile. It actually does affect your mood. I force myself to laugh a little bit, to lighten up a little bit. And then I do it, because if you're stressed, the kids are going to feel it through the video. And then, as much as possible, give them the sense of wonder. I think in so much of education, we lose the sense of wonder. I was giving feedback to one of our colleagues who was making a video on solar energy. And they said, they started the video with saying the sun is 93 million miles from Earth. And my feedback is, why did you just say that the sun is 93 million miles? You have to say the sun is 93 million miles away from Earth. That is amazing. If you go at the speed of a bullet, it would take you 17 years to get to the sun. And almost all of our energy on this planet comes from the sun, even though we get 1/billionth of the energy from the sun. And the sun can fit 1 million Earths in it. So everything we teach across any subject, it's full of these fascinating ideas. We just have to remind students how amazing and how wonderful they are. And if you can do that, then your kids are going to be activated as learners.
I see. Another point that we are discussing a lot here in Brazil, and I'm sure that there is the same discussion in the US, is related to evaluations. So I would say that this was a trend that was already happening before the pandemic, of change a little bit. How do we see evaluations? That evaluation is not a goal by itself, is much more like a process that students should learn with it and should be able to know what they have to learn after that. And of course, platforms and technology can help in this sense. And then given this broad point of evaluation, I would like to ask you, what are the trends that you are seeing? What are the new types of evaluation that we can do nowadays with our students? And how can technology help us in this sense?
Yeah, and evaluation is very similar to technology. People tend to become very opinionated on it, but I say, like technology, evaluation is neither evil nor good. What really matters is how you're using it and what is the pedagogical goal. And if you have a good pedagogical goal and you're using it well, it can be very, very, very useful. In general, I do think to improve at anything, you do need to have some way to evaluate, some way to measure, some way to test it. And I do think it is better for it to be standardized than not standardized, because by being standardized, you can benchmark, you can understand where you or the student is relative to other students, relative to other geographies. Now, I think the mistake that we've done globally with standardized testing is we give the test and it takes valuable class time away, but we don't really leverage the test. And we use the test more to judge students or teachers versus trying to improve the outcome for students. So what I would say generally, whatever the assessment is, make sure that when you get the results, that it's not the end, it's actually just beginning. So based on the results, you should then go work with the students and get them to a better state and then evaluate again. We're big believers in this notion of mastery learning. Mastery learning means evaluate. If a student has mastered it, great, they can move on. But if a student hasn't mastered it, don't tell that student that they're not bright. Don't just give them a bad grade. Say you haven't learned it yet, keep working on it, and then at a future date, you can get evaluated again. Now, evaluation historically has been pretty expensive. You have to give a paper-based exam. Everyone needs to sit down. You might not have multiple copies of that exam. If it's standardized, you can't do it regularly. But what's really interesting about where we are now is that a platform like Khan Academy, not only is it micro lessons, not only is it practice, but every one of those practice items on Khan Academy really is a small standardized assessment. And it's not a standardized assessment like this is going to judge where you go to college, et cetera, but it provides real-time information for the student and for the teacher on where that student is. And so before it's too late, before the exam happens, before the kids leave the classroom, the teacher can say, hey, it looks like you've been having difficulty with this concept. Keep working on it. So instead of telling the students, oh, you have an 80%, I'm giving you a C, and the student says, oh, I'm a C student, I'm not that smart, say, hey, you're at an 80% right now, keep working on it. Or even if we move to the next concept, I want to give you the opportunity and the incentive to improve that 80%. So if you can take it again, get to 90%, 95%, that's what we're going to use in your evaluation. Ideally, that goes on even beyond when they're in that classroom. But even within a classroom, I think there's a real opportunity to use evaluation, and the technical term is in a formative way like this, to use the evaluation while the learning is happening and to provide more learning with it and to keep reevaluating.
Yeah, we here at SAS, we are, I would say, believers of evaluation, generally speaking, and we think very much on this process of evaluation, not just to take grades, but there's a whole process in learning that the evaluation process can help. So changing gear a little bit now for the perspective of the students. So of course they were also affected a lot with pandemic and how they are learning. Can you give us a little bit of your own experience on what was good, what was bad for those students? They were happy, they were not happy. In the perspective of them, was it effective or not? And a few comments on the perspective of the students with the use of technology.
Yeah, so I think universally speaking, from a social, emotional point of view, the pandemic has been suboptimal for the great majority of students. So you have had students who've actually been able to keep learning during this environment. And there's also even cases where the flexibility of the pandemic allowed certain students to even learn more than they might have learned otherwise. But I think everyone has been suffering from not have accessing their friends, being in the same room with their teacher, really having that sense of community. I've seen this with my own children. I run a school. I help run a school out here called Khan Lab School. Obviously, we work with thousands of teachers and schools around the world, and we've seen this pretty consistently. So it's been very suboptimal. So hopefully in the next few months, we can get to normal there. In terms of the academic side, it's been interesting. We've seen globally that the students that have the right supports at home, whose classrooms were able to move to blended or hybrid learning in a robust way, students who have internet access, who have a device at home, many of them have actually been able to keep learning. And once again, the flexibility might have even helped some of them. They've been able to personalize more. But we've also seen on the other side, depending on the country, the region, the city you look at, 30, 40, 50% of students who did not have sufficient internet access, who did not have a device, or there might have been one device at home, but they had to share it with 5 family members, or they didn't have the right supports at home, or their school was not able to move quickly enough maybe to fully support them. And then, so those students really did accumulate a lot of academic gaps over this past year. We're seeing that globally. So what we've told everyone is, even though we're at the light at the end of the tunnel with the pandemic, and hopefully in the next 6 months, we can begin to really become closer to normal, we have to treat the time period after that really as a disaster recovery, because the very same kids who didn't have access, who fell behind, that were likely already behind before the pandemic, who were already more vulnerable before the pandemic. So this is why it's even more important than ever that the variation between students has gone more higher. So we have to think about, how do we reach every student where they are? Instead of just keep pushing them forward, whether or not they learned it, we have to make sure that all students have resources to fill in their gaps, finish any unfinished learning, refresh everything that they might have forgotten, so they have a strong foundation to build off of.
Yes, and as you told, the school is not only a place for learning, right? It's also to bring a lot of different experience for our students, and that they will develop different types of skills, and not only cognitive. And my next question is, what is your feeling regarding these other skills that the students must develop, not only cognitive, and how can we create a disaster recovery plan for these kind of skills?
So I think there's the academic, and then there's the social emotional side, and then there's some that are at the intersection. One of the most important academic skills, or metacognitive skills, I would say, that the traditional system has not been explicitly focused on, is learning how to learn, learning how to be an independent learner. And I would argue that That's always been the most important skill academically, and it's going to become an increasingly important skill. So a lot of students are even good students, they're used to being told what to do next. Is this going to be on the test? Then I'll memorize it. Okay, tell me what to do next hour. Tell me what to do for homework tonight. A really powerful skill, and I've written a lot about it, and Khan Academy is really designed to build this muscle, is it's great if the teacher or a parent can focus a student on a specific skill, but it's also important for the student themselves to say, why am I learning this skill? What is next? How prepared am I for this skill? If I need to prepare other things, how can I go back and fill in my gaps? Because if they're able to build that metacognitive skill, they're going to be unstoppable. They're going to be in school for 12 years, 16 years, but then even once they graduate, they're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, we know the world is constantly evolving. They're going to have to retool their skills. They're going to have to relearn things. And we also know that the resources are out there. You have Khan Academy, you have Coursera, you have edX, you have all of these resources that are out there for people to learn, but they have to have that metacognitive skill. So as a parent, as an educator, for the students I work with, one of the most important things I do is try to model for them, try to encourage them to take more ownership of their learning. The other things that are really important, you know, this notion of self-care, being able to really be grounded, I can't overstate how important that is. I think everyone here recognizes as educators, the depression, anxiety, stress is at all-time highs in the globe. And it's not just because of the pandemic. The pandemic has contributed to it. Arguably, social media has contributed to it. People feel also just the competitive nature in many cases of an academic setting contributed to it. And we know that if a student is not in the right place mentally, if they are depressed, if they are anxious, there's no way that they're going to be able to learn the algebra or the Portuguese or the history. And so I think the more that we as educators, and you know, people are surprised to hear this from me because this isn't the focus of Khan Academy, although this is one of the focuses of my life. The more that we can focus on making sure kids are grounded, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through, I bribe my kids to meditate. I say, for every 10 minutes you meditate with me, I'll give you 30 minutes of Minecraft. I think it's a positive net equation for them. But what it does is it makes them more grounded. It makes them more willing to take risks. That's another point. You know, the more that we can build growth mindset. A lot of people are afraid to take risks, afraid to fail because they think it's a judgment on themselves. But if you destigmatize risk-taking, then people are willing to push themselves more, step out of their comfort zone. And so, you know, when I think about what I'd hope for my own children or really anyone's children out there is that not only do they learn, have a strong foundation while they're in school, but they learn how to learn so that they can keep learning whether they're in school or not, that they're grounded with meditation, they have good, solid friendships, mentorship, so that they don't feel alone, they don't feel anxious. They're always stepping out of their comfort zone. They feel a sense of purpose, and they're resilient because life is going to throw stuff at you, throw stuff at all of us. And the most important thing is to know how to not take it too seriously and pick yourself back up.
Well, I'm pretty sure that resilience is something that was well developed during this pandemic. Another point I'll take, I think that from what you said, there's a lot of the concept of autonomy, right, from the students, and we are also believers of that, of this the need for students to improve their own autonomy and in the autonomy towards education and study. And then taking that point, what would you recommend to develop the autonomy from students? How can we bring this skill as a broad thing that our own students may have?
I'll give an example. In traditional academic settings, a teacher will assign homework. Do this assignment by tonight, and I'll check it tomorrow morning. And it still makes sense to do that sometimes, but as students get older, as you get into late elementary school, middle school, high school, instead of saying do exactly this tonight, give longer goals. So if you have a high school student, say, can you finish this unit within the next 3 weeks? And then once you get past that unit, you can keep going if you like. If you haven't finished that unit, if you haven't mastered those concepts over that 3 weeks, we move on to the next one, but I'm going to give you incentives to keep working on it. Leverage vacations, summer vacation, winter vacation in Brazil, to say, hey, If you want to get extra credit, you want to get extra points, set a goal. And if I approve that goal as an educator, as your teacher, then if you do it, you're going to get X, Y, and Z. It's going to benefit you in this way. So the more that you can allow students to have a little bit more of that autonomy, to take control, ask students, what do you want to accomplish in this class? What are your goals? How can I support you better? How can you support me as the teacher? How can you support each other better? Students aren't used to being asked these questions, but it invests them in the collective experience versus just being passive recipients of the experience. So I think all of that starts to change their mindset, and they realize that this education is for them. They're not just jumping through hoops for adults, that it's theirs to make the most out of.
Interesting. And what about the other concept that you bring, that was the risk-taking? How can we develop this sense of people should take more risks, not financially speaking, but like trying to expose themselves and try to challenge themselves to do something more ambitious, let's say this way. How can we develop that with our students?
Yeah, there's a lot of academic research on this, on the areas of growth mindset and grit. And not only has it shown that someone with a growth mindset and has more resilience, not only are they more likely to succeed, but there's actually a good body of research on how you can build a growth mindset in students. So I encourage people to look at the work of Angela Duckworth, the work of Carol Dweck, but they recommend things like, even if students are told, do you realize your brain is like a muscle? The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Emphasize to students, what doesn't matter is the outcome. What matters is the process by which they do it. So instead of telling students you're smart, tell students, I like how you struggled with that. I like how you worked on the hard things. Oh, you got this so fast. This is too easy for you. I'm sorry for wasting your time. Let me use your time better by giving you something hard, because that's when you really learn. When you fail, those are the times when where your brain is forming the most connections. So congratulations for pushing yourself to your boundary. On top of that, ideally, we have systems in place when it comes to grades where that gets reinforced. Once again, if you're at an 80%, we don't tell you you're a C student, you're not so smart. We say, keep working on it. I'm really proud that you're working on something that you're struggling with. That's how you're going to grow the most. And that matters not just for learning the math, that matters for life in general. It's hard sometimes. We all fall into the patterns of fixed mindset sometimes, but I've even seen it with my own children. We've seen it at our students at Khan Lab School, that over time, when you reinforce these ideas and you give them opportunities to step out of their comfort zone and you destigmatize failure, it really does pay off.
That is very insightful, and I completely agree with the words. So another question. Some people see technology as a threat for the connection between the students, right? The way that they talk to each other, communication, and all this kind of stuff. And I heard from one of your podcasts that maybe technology can be an enabler of connection between people. Could you explore a little bit how technology can be used to help the students to know each other?
Yeah, this is something I strongly believe in. I actually think technology can be a humanizing factor in the classroom. One of the reasons why I started a lab school out here in California is because I think the physical experience is so important, the human connection is so important, and to show people that these are not competing ideas. So if anyone visits Khan Lab School, what I think they will immediately be surprised by is how collaborative the students are, and how much they're interacting with each other and with their teachers, and how there's no antagonism between the teachers and the students. They all feel like they're on one team together. And so we use technology really to unlock the physical in-person experience. So the best uses of technology, not just at Khan Lab School, but we've seen classrooms around the world, is once again, when the kids are in the room together, they aren't just being delivered a lecture. They are able to work on problems together. The teacher is able to walk around to do focused interventions with small groups of students, or even do some one-on-one. The teacher is able to orchestrate so that the students are working with each other. So in this world, ironically, you're actually having more human-to-human interaction than the world where I, as a teacher, stand at the front and I just lecture. We all remember being students. We remember that sometimes a lecture is okay, but sometimes it can be very dehumanizing. You're not allowed to talk. You have to pretend like you're paying attention. The ideal is if you not only are allowed to talk, you're encouraged to talk, as long as you're talking about something that's on topic, but you're encouraged to talk. You're encouraged to talk to each other. The teacher, it's a two-way stream of information. I think everyone who has gone into education, they don't dream about lecturing to students. They dream about forming bonds with students. They dream about unlocking the student's potential. They dream that the students will say, hey, you unlocked me. You showed me my potential. That's why everyone goes into the profession. And ironically, I think that can be unlocked with technology.
I agree. One last point here on the perspective of the students. One of our directors said earlier that by reading your books, he got the inspiration to create some of our gamified solutions from SAS. And in this sense, I'd like to ask you, what is your view on gamification as a way of learning for students? And what do you think is the future? And do you think it's a great future for gamification or not? So if you could talk a little bit on gamification for education.
Oh, I'm a big fan of gamification and motivation mechanics. And I remind folks, we've always had motivation mechanics in the school system. Grades are extrinsic motivators, so to speak. Diplomas are extrinsic motivators. In most of the world, by law, you have to go to school. Otherwise, they'll pick you up off the street. That is an extrinsic motivator. Now, we know that the video game industry, and specifically over the last 20 or 30 years, they know how to get people addicted to something. Now, we know video games, that addiction is not always a good thing. But if we can learn from the video game industry to get people to get addicted to learning, I think that's a very positive thing. Because the more that, even if it might be extrinsic motivators, you get points, you get badges, you get unlock different animations, it will over time make the student more confident and make them more intrinsically motivated. They'll start to realize how interesting the subject matter is. Now, with that said, I think you have to be careful. Sometimes when people start gamifying, there's the gaming and then there's the learning. And sometimes they lean too much on the game because, if you're a video game manufacturer, you're not that concerned about the learning. So you can just optimize everything to make kids addicted to it. While as educators, we want to optimize for the learning. So it's never going to be as addictive as a pure video game. But I think we can meet someplace where we don't compromise the learning, but we leverage as much as we can from the video game industry and other motivation mechanics from industry general to get the kids on the learning as much as possible. And once again, that allows us as educators sometimes to take a little bit of a step back and see how the kids can learn on their own, which is something that we're going to have to teach them to do because they're not going to be with us forever.
I agree. And let me ask you a follow-up question on this. Would you say that having a strong connection between what the game is bringing to the student and what is the teacher teaching at that exactly week or month, is that a key component to bridge this challenge that you're bringing?
Yeah, I say yes and no. I think it's nice if sometimes they reinforce each other, but what I'm about to say is a little controversial. I don't think it has to always reinforce each other in the moment, because one thing we also know is not sometimes, it's always good for students to see multiple concepts at multiple times in different orders from different perspectives. That helps form the neurons better. We know what traditionally happens in education. Let's say we're covering a set of skills in 1 week, and even if the in-person or the video game or the online, they're all tackling the same thing, it might be focused on that topic that week, but then we give the test and then the kids might forget it. We know that maybe if they're able to see that concept 3 weeks before through the video game, and then 3 weeks later when the teacher covers it, their brain will already be primed and it'll be refreshed. And then the learning will be that much deeper. It could be the other way around. They saw it in class in week 1, and then 4 weeks later, they see it from a different angle through the software, through the online resource. Once again, it's going to reinforce that idea. and it's going to be less likely that the student forgets it, and they're going to be more likely to draw connections. So I think sometimes it's nice if they're reinforcing the same ideas on the same day and the same week, but I also think it's nice when they don't always reinforce each other, as long as over the course of the year or the course of many years, they're reinforcing the same thing, but at different times.
I see. Interesting. So in the end, you're saying that it's important to have this connection, but not necessarily in the same time. They can have some a few weeks or even a few months of difference. It's a very interesting perspective. So we are coming here to the end of our discussion here. I have just a few more questions. One of them is a lot of people are talking about the pandemic as a window of opportunity to change education, right? So education is a sector that, or schools is something that hasn't changed a lot over the past years. And given this pandemic, the change has been accelerated. And maybe a lot of things that people were looking forward to have in the education sector that were not progressing very, very fast. Now we can realize and we can have those changes. So my question, so a lot of people are talking about that, and my question is, what is your view on that? Can we be optimistic that the change that we need in our education system will be achieved given this window of opportunity, or you have a lot of concerns about that?
I have both. On the concern side, we already talked about it, where there's been a segment of students, 30%, 40%, whose learning has suffered over this past year and a half. And so I think we have to create mechanisms to really help those students. Otherwise, these were students who are already on the fence, and if we don't give them supports, they're going to have risk of dropping out or not succeeding. But I am optimistic that we have a whole generation of educators, a whole generation of parents, of administrators, of students who, out of necessity, have to become familiar with technology. It's been suboptimal because of the constraints of the pandemic, but it is going to make it easier to have creative and very positive uses of technology along the lines that we've talked about going forward. Concepts that learning should not be bound by time or space, that we should be able to meet students where they are, that teachers should be supported with real-time information, that the class time can be more interactive from a human point of view, where humans are interacting more with each other. I hope that all of this has been accelerated from the pandemic, and also the digital divide. We're seeing globally that there's been more energy in making sure that students at home have at least some basic access. And if that happens, then it becomes easier for educators to lean on having device access or internet access at home. And then there's big ideas like competency-based learning, where your credit for a class or for high school or for college shouldn't be based on how much you spent in a chair. It should be based on whether you learned the material or not. For some students, it might take a year. For some students, it might take 4 years. I think these types of ideas, learning not being bound by time or space, competency-based learning, making sure that there's multiple modalities to support students, everyone being more comfortable with technology, these give me a lot of hope in the post-pandemic world.
I see. Interesting. So people here in the chat are very excited with the talk, and they are saying that it was very inspiring for them. I think we are now closing our conversation, but I would like to open for your final remarks. What would you like to tell everyone before the end of our conversation?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I will just reiterate some of the key points. Everyone here as an educator, I think, desires and has chosen a life that is in service to others. And I would argue in service to the most important folks. Obviously, it sounds even a little bit trite, a little cheesy, but the students that you are working with literally are going to be the future of Brazil. And so there's no more noble thing to work on. But I think sometimes when you work on something that is noble and you have passion for, people forget in English the word passion, it actually means suffering. Because when you care about something so much, it can often make you suffer. So number one, take care of yourself. it can be overwhelming. This has been an overwhelming year. And number two, there's no more exciting time, I would argue, in the last 200 or 300 years to be an educator. There's no time in history when you've had more tools at your disposal, when you've had, especially post-pandemic, more people willing to think out of the box, willing to think systems differently, willing to think about education differently. And you as the educator are in the driver's seat. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. So you got to take care of yourself. You got to do the meditation, whatever it takes, but also put one foot in front of the other. And I think when we look back at this time 10 years in the future, we're going to realize that it was a pretty neat time to be able to be an educator.
I totally agree. I think everyone here in Brazil is very excited with the time that we have. So I would like to thank you very much for our time today. It was an outstanding conversation. People are really excited here. I'm receiving lots of messages on my WhatsApp here, telling that it was a great conversation. So again, thank you very much for having the time to talk to us, and have a wonderful night in the US.
Thanks for having me. A lot of fun.
Bye-bye.
Muito obrigada, pessoal. Muito obrigada, Rafa. Que momento incrível. Na verdade, eu acho que esse momento está marcado na história de todos os summits, na verdade. Lembrei agora de um momento que o
Time.
professor Ademar falou.
And I remember something that Professor Ademar said about the inspiration that we can have in our classroom. And the evaluation must be focused on process, on real time. And I remember Eureka that was mentioned in the last event. So because Eureka look at these procedures and this process way, it was a very moment with a lot of learnings. I took a lot of notes about gamification, about videos, so I'll have a lot to develop from it. Let's see some of our interactions, some of the comments on our chat. People are asking for a dinner with Sol Khan. So how is it going? Thank you. Thank you, Isaac. Our chat was absolutely filled with messages. I was going from the English room to the Portuguese room. And Solimar is very engaged from day one. She has been engaged. And I think, and she was mentioned that going from the English room to the Portuguese room was very exciting. And besides that, one of the things that was highlights on our chat room was a comment from Daniel and Elisette, both teachers. And they said that technology has been around for a long time, and it's up to us to use as a tool. So there's not a better time, more exciting time than ours to be an educator, as Saul mentioned during his speech. I imagine that you have a lot of notes that you took during his presentation. Giba here was thanking the MCs of the event. It will not be possible to comment on all of them because there's a lot of comments on Instagram and also in other social media channels. We will be back in the end of the event, and we ask you if you want to say something, go to our social media, use our hashtag. The event is also present on LinkedIn using the hashtag I'm on SAS Summit. SAS Summit, estou no SAS Summit in Portuguese. A little bit more of the Instagram interaction. So Roselma here took a picture. Roselma is from João Pessoa. A selfie with Solcan. Caroline. Solimar, that I mentioned before. She was saying that she was studying English during the presentation. Cassia said mentioned Solcan, Roselma. There's a lot of selfies took with Sol on Instagram. I'll be back with more interaction. Now Gleice and Isaac will call our next presenter. Cassia, I think we're trending right now on social media. So, and our relatives are also very present on our social medias. So. And I'll now like to call our next speaker, Ari. Growing in a family of educators, he took education as a purpose of life and also to his career. He works in this area from the beginning of his career. Today, he's considered a national reference in entrepreneurship and innovation. He has a degree in business and MBA, and also in business by the MIT. So it's an honor to call now the CEO and founder of SAS, Ari Dessa, to finish this incredible event with a very inspiring moment. Good evening, Ari. Good evening, Gleice. Good evening, Zach. How are you guys? So we're closing to the end of our event, and it's an honor to have you talking about the experience of the SAS Summit. The experience was amazing. It's even difficult for me to say something because we have so many amazing people talking to us, sharing their experience, incredible teachers. So I'm very happy and I'm thankful for all of them. It's 8:28 in Brazil, and people are still here sharing and searching for knowledge. I think that our path, we built SAS as an institution in which our people are taking our mission into their lives every day. And our mission is to transform people's lives through education. We try to transform our lives through education by studying, learning, trying to evolve, and building a group that in one in which people respect each other. So we have a strong team that brought us here. But there's also an aspect in our path that is very strong, which is to dream big. Although we started in the city of Fortaleza, we always dreamed of being the largest education platform in Brazil, to have the best products. So we are proud of our products. And it makes us happy to build products and to build learnings that will bring something, knowledge to our students. And by dreaming big, we look for the best that we could find in the world So I used to say, let's go to China, to India, to the US. Let's visit the Silicon Valley so we can have our inspiration to build the solution that we love so much, which is our platform, SAS. And in this process, as SAS just said minutes ago, it's something that makes me very emotional because I had the opportunity to visit Khan Academy about 5 years ago in the Silicon Valley. So I wasn't there at that moment, but every time we hire someone that is better than us, they will do something better than what we do. So today, having the opportunity to share with the own creator, with Saul, his vision of education, with our schools, it's something that makes me very, very happy. So I think we are bringing people that inspired us through books, through trips, to learnings. They are coming here to share their knowledge, to share their view to our schools, to our partners. So this makes me very, very happy. Earlier today, I could have a conversation with Luisa Trajano. For those of you who are not here, I think it's worth watching because she has an example of someone that is humble and is very human. And she says, and how can we concentrate ourselves in the important things in our companies, in our schools? So, strong woman, and she's a leader of something that goes beyond herself and her experience. So it was a pleasure to have her today. I would like to leave with an optimistic message. I think the path of the vaccination makes us happy right now, and with hope that we are reaching a turning point on this crisis that we have lived. We, as educators, we want our schools open, and we know that our kids have to be in the school, our students, our children, to be educated in the best way possible. And technology is a spectacular tool, but nothing can replace a teacher, can replace a face-to-face moment. And we know that at SAS. So this optimism that I bring, I think we have to be resilient, we have to be strong. It's not going to be easy. I think we will have a lot of gaps in the education process because students were not with us. But we believe that the face-to-face moment and with technology is something that can strengthen learning. So I hope that in August this year, I hope that we are inside the school, listening to the students with that energy. We all vaccinated, so we can restart with full force. So again, I would like to thank the trust that our clients put on us. We know that we have a very important mission as a content provider, service provider to schools, to students, and we take responsibility with joy, with gratitude, and eager to do always the best. We have a very strong feature that is to always evolve. We always think that our events are not ready, that our products can be better. So the ability of this SAS team to surprise me is amazing. When I started as an entrepreneur, I never imagined that we could have an event with this quality, with this size. So there's joy in it, and it comes from the ability of having a fantastic team. And this is what makes us the proudest, to have this team with the owner sense, and that wants to deliver excellence to the students. And this event proves that our ability to deliver more and to do more to our clients. So I would like to not to go for a long time because I think it's a little late, but so I have this message of gratitude. And I know that we'll certainly work a lot to answer this trust, and maybe even to surprise our students, our schools with solutions so they can fulfill their dreams of changing their lives through education. So thank you all, teachers, staff, our team. I congratulate you all, and I'm very proud of having this fantastic event. Thank you all. Isaac and Blaise, I wish you all a very healthy day and week. We will certainly, well, we have this, the history of our last meetings, the learnings, and how the people that we put together. And I would like to emphasize what you said, that we have a purpose, dedication as a purpose of life. So now we are wrapping up our event, and I think it's an event that was important to our lives. And our learnings, we have more learnings, and it has just started. We have another guest, and Cassie is coming in again to our stage. So since I'm on the main stage right now, I would like to say that I think we would like to have more of that, because we have all these Wednesdays meetings, and it makes us closer, although distant. And before you turn off the lights, we would like to show you what we have behind the scenes in this event, and would like to thank you all in the production team. So we'll turn off the lights and we'll see our stage, and also we'll see those who are working with us today. Let us check then. The lights are turning off, but we are still here to say goodbyes, so you can see the stage. This is the environment we are working. So you can see all the staff, the production staff. They are the responsible for having the magic of the event. They work at hours and hours and hours to bring this amazing event to all of us. So our final acknowledgements and a last message. We have a survey to evaluate and bring a better experience every time we are together. So please answer the survey. We'll have there's a QR code on the screen, but also on the chat room, we'll see a link for the survey. another topic. It's about the certificates. Those who are part of the event will get their certificates on their email. So that's it. Thank you all. And see you all again in 2022. See you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Existem muitos tipos de escola. Aquelas que, com seu espírito inovador, são pioneiras no uso da tecnologia em prol do desenvolvimento humanizado. Existem escolas que, através da sua gestão de excelência, entregam ensino e aprendizado exemplares, mesmo em cenários adversos. Outras escolas sabem que, através da sua qualidade pedagógica, são capazes de oferecer o conteúdo mais atualizado para ampliar o repertório dos alunos. Existem escolas que criam um aluno nota 1000, fazendo de tudo para ter os melhores resultados. E ainda existem escolas que prezam muito pela formação de docentes, tendo professores incríveis que fazem toda a diferença. Mas todas as escolas têm o mesmo propósito: garantir a melhor educação para seus alunos. Nós também queremos isso. E se cada escola tem um perfil, todo perfil de escola tem um SAS.